Well, good evening, folks. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm excited to get to talk to you about Get More Math. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, and then we'll go over what we're going to talk about tonight. I just wanted to let you know that in your control panel, if you have questions throughout the webinar, go ahead and type those in, and I will stop periodically throughout my presentation to try to address your questions. So, good evening. I'm Erica Martin. I am the Director of Training here at Get More Math. Prior to this position, I taught math in public education for 14 years, 2 years at the middle school level, and then the next 12 years at the high school level. And I really taught across the board, very advanced kids, very low kids, and those middle of the road kids as well. I was lucky enough at the end of my career to discover Get More Math and was able to see firsthand the amazing results that it produced for me in my classroom. I quickly shared it with every other math teacher I knew. I saw those results as well. It was not just a fluke. And now it's my job to share this program with as many math teachers as I can. And it's pretty incredible to see the difference it's making across the country. So that's just a little bit about myself. And I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off, and we'll go ahead and get started. All right. Hoping everybody can see my slideshow there. I should have someone on the call to make sure. All right, so here we go. This is our agenda for this evening. We are going to go over a student demonstration. So I'm going to show you what that program looks like from the student end. Then we're going to talk about the overview of testing that Get More Math has to offer and the follow-up that's pieced with that and what a difference that made in my classroom. Then we'll show some results in different data from some classrooms that have shown some amazing growth with their students. And then we're going to end with some frequently asked questions to answer any questions you may have on how you can get started. So let's go ahead and do that. There are three main features to Get More Math that we're going to talk about today. It's a very robust program. It was created by a math teacher in Pennsylvania over about a 20-year period. He really wanted to figure out how can he not only make sure that his students learned today's lesson, but more importantly, how could he use a computer program to make sure that they remembered prior lessons? Because I'll be honest, this first piece, the initial mastery, math teachers, we teach them a skill, and then we have our kids practice that skill. That was the piece that I always felt like I personally did a really good job at that. I could take fairly difficult material. I felt like I could present it in a way that even really low students could produce what I wanted. This second piece about remembering prior lessons is where I truly struggled. It just seemed like once I would go, 3 or 4 sections ahead, my students would lose the previous material. So it was step 2 that I needed the most assistance. I will tell you step 3, which is the assessment piece with Get More Math, was also critical. And here was why. I was a teacher that I gave tests, I saw the results, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to use the results in the way I knew I should. I often just moved on. It was simply a grade, and I moved on because I felt like I needed to get through a certain amount of material in a certain amount of time. Where when I started to use Get More Math to create cumulative assessments, the program also was able to make sure that every student was fixing the mistakes they made on a test, remediating those specific skills that they were weak on, and then it follows up with every single student on their own individual mistakes. And I'm going to explain how all of this works, but these are the 3 features that we're going to go over tonight. Now, there is one particular feature that Get More Math, GMM is what we call it for short, will not do, and it will not replace the teacher. So as we go through this demonstration, you'll notice there is no instructional component whatsoever. Like I said, Josh Britton, the creator of the program, always felt that the best person to provide the instruction in a classroom is in fact the teacher. And so we are assuming the presence of a highly qualified, engaging teacher that is still going to craft those lessons, present that material to the students, make sure they're ready for the practice. And then while they're practicing, if there is in fact an issue, we want the teacher to come over and engage with the student to sort of cover whatever that error was. We'll talk about that as well. So let's take a look at what it might look like if you were to use Get More Math in your classroom. So here we go. This is the student screen. I want to point out a handful of things. At the top, you'll see there's the title for this particular lesson. It's ordered pairs. These are all decisions that the teacher makes. So the teacher has pulled this particular skill into what we call an assignment. She has taught maybe this lesson on linear equations, where we are developing a table with ordered pairs. And the teacher has decided that the students need to earn 6 points on this skill in order to complete the assignment. So the way that looks, students will enter in a particular answer. If they get it correct, they'll submit it. Smileys will rain down from the heavens, and they in fact earned a point for today. Now, this is what's interesting. If your students are anything like mine, they had one goal when I gave them an assignment. It was not to know the material. It was not to have a deep understanding of the material. It was to get done. Most middle school, high school students, that's what they want. They simply want to finish. So students may look at this and think, wow, I only need to do 6 problems. That's not very much. But in reality, that's not what we're asking in Get More Math. We're not saying just do 6 problems, because watch what happens if this student misses the negative coefficient here. Let's assume that they accidentally make a mistake and they submit the answer and it's incorrect. You see that it tells me my first try is incorrect. But what's interesting here is the student has to fix this particular problem. The program will not give them another problem of this type to practice until they fix their error. So a handful of options suddenly become available. Maybe the student can check their work. Maybe they can fix it on their own. That would be great. Maybe the student can ask their neighbor. This would happen. Hey, Johnny, what's the answer to number 2? Well, here's the secret. Johnny's number 2 is not the same as this student's number 2. So the olden days of just saying, oh, the answer is 18 doesn't work anymore. That student may come over and help. In my class, I certainly encouraged that. But what was nice was now, in order for a peer to help this particular student, they actually have to sit and work the problem out with them. I love that. And then there's a third and final option. The student finally has to succumb and raise their hand and ask me, the teacher, for help. And I loved that. So suddenly those quiet kiddos that were always happy to just sit and do their book work or do their worksheet, and they never engaged with me, and I never really knew there were problems. Now I know there's an issue. So I'm able to conference with my students and show them, hey, there's a negative coefficient here. You may not realize that's a -1. And the beautiful piece is I can adjust that error. I can address it before they make the mistake once, twice, 3 times. So I'm no longer reinforcing an error. Instead, I'm hopefully addressing it before they repeat it. So let's see what happens if the student goes back, they figure out their mistake, they fix it, they get the correct answer, the smileys fall because they now got it right. But what you'll notice is, did the students now see 2 of 6? They actually did not. So I'm going to pause for a second. This is a critical piece of Get More Math. In order for students to earn a point, they actually have to get this question correct on the first try. And if they get it incorrect, they have to fix it. Well, let me tell you that after the students sort of understand this process, they quickly realize that in order to get done, which is still what most students want to do, they actually have to value the process. They have to value understanding how the problem works, because if they do not get the problem correct, they will not get the point. And if they do not get the points, they will not get done. And so this was one of those critical shifts for me when I had a very low-level algebra class. My students were suddenly much more interested in accuracy, in checking their work, because they suddenly cared about getting the problem right. And what was nice was, after we did that for an entire school year, that translated when it came time for the big state test. So let's see what happens again if we answer this question correctly on the first try. We submit it, smileys fall, and you'll see that now we are at 2 of 6. So that's the first thing we have to understand about Get More Math. If we are on a particular problem and we get it right on the first try, we will get a point. If we don't, we still have to fix it, but we don't earn a point. So let's go ahead and fast forward. Let's see what happens 3 points later. We're at 5 of 6. We're about to get our 6th point. Some students may think they are done for the day, but in reality, you are not done. What happens in Get More Math is we've said to the student, okay, you know enough about today's lesson, this linear equation, developing a table of ordered pairs. Once they reach that number 6, which again was set by the teacher, and remember, each student will do that in their own time, they are then put seamlessly into our second, and what I would argue is a more important mode called mixed review. So let's take a look at our mixed review screen. We still have 6 points for the day, but instead of having one colored square at the top of our screen, we've got 6. Each one of these squares represents a problem type that I, the teacher, have taught previously. So you'll notice this one here is yellow. This is the one we just worked out. Maybe this is yesterday's skill, and the day before, and the day before, and the day before, and the day before. So these are all the previously practiced skills, and this builds seamlessly for the teacher based on any practice session, any assignment. Now, there's something important that we have to notice. Do you notice that of these 6 squares, only 2 of them have dollar signs? I'm not sure if you noticed on the previous screen that every time we were working a problem out, it had a dollar sign on it. Well, that was because we only had one option. Here's how Get More Math actually takes these mixed review sessions and individualizes it for every single student. That's right. I'm going to repeat that. While students are in mixed review, Get More Math is actually individualizing the practice session based on their strengths and weaknesses. So what Get More Math is doing right now is looking at this particular student's data trail, and it is saying that of these 6 skills, the 2 that are most important, that are most needed to be practiced, is this skill right here, plotting a point. But maybe I'm not interested in this particular problem. I don't like to plot points with 0. Do I have the choice to click over and choose the other dollar sign problem? I do. Maybe I look at this and I'm more comfortable with an evaluate problem. So I'll go ahead and answer this problem. Because it has a dollar sign, that means if I get it correct, it is worth a point to me. I'm going to get it correct, so that 6 should turn to a 7. Smileys fall, and I did earn a point. But you'll notice Get More Math took the dollar sign away from that problem type. Get More Math thought, okay, you've shown me that you can answer that question correctly, so now this is no longer eligible for a point. You must go over and work on this particular problem. So I'll go ahead and answer this problem. If I get it right, smileys fall, and Get More Math will once again reevaluate the data. And it says, okay, given the data trail, right now, these are the 3 problems we want you to work on. And once I answer those 3, it will continue to reevaluate and reassign dollar signs based on what this student needs. Now, this is just a very small sampling of 6 problems. What happens as time goes on? We know as math teachers, we've got a lot of material that we need to cover. So maybe a few weeks later, that mixed review grows and continues to grow and grow until suddenly when we're at January, now we're up to almost 60 skills. And this is where the differentiation is most impressive, because I want you to think about something. If you have 100 students in a day and you've now taught up to 60 skills, if your students were given a review worksheet, does every student actually need to review the same skills? We all know that answer is no. And that was the beautiful piece for me, is when my students were in mixed review, I knew that they were being handpicked the problems they needed the most. Now, for this particular problem, We've got these $3 up here that Get More Math would like this particular student to practice. And we've got these 3 down here. Now I'm going to talk about what these colors mean, which will lead us into how Get More Math determines which questions get a $. So our weakest color level is red. So you can see here we have 4 skills that are marked red. A skill type can be red for 2 reasons. If it has very little practice, if you've only ever done a problem 2 or 3 times, it's still red. So it could mean it's very, very new, or it could mean you've practiced it quite a bit, but you continue to get it wrong on the first try. And so it either means you're very, very weak or you don't have very much practice. Now, as you start to get a problem correct more often, that red will turn to yellow. As you continue to improve over time, a yellow skill will turn green. Even longer term improvement will turn to a silver star, and the very highest rating would be a gold star. So this is actually a pretty good representation of what skills the student has mastered. And you need to remember that in Get More Math, we do not consider mastery to be you have sat down and answered a skill 50 times correctly today. Josh knew that that didn't actually mean a student mastered a skill. You can answer a question 50 times correctly today, and if you don't do it for 3 weeks or 6 weeks, you may actually forget it. And so those gold stars take into consideration a period of time in which a student has answered a question, stepped away from it, answered it again, and still got it correct. So I always felt that they were a little bit more accurate in whether or not a student actually mastered a skill. So let's go back to the $signs. It would make sense to most people why these red squares have $signs. Obviously, the student has not shown a whole lot of progress with those skills. They probably haven't answered them correctly a whole bunch of times, so it makes sense that the program will want them to answer those questions. But what's more interesting is why these gold $signs exist up here, because what they would have been is a gold star. So why would Get More Math want this student to practice a skill that has a rating of a gold star when in reality we've got a yellow one here? And here's why. First of all, we all know that we need our students to be motivated to come in and practice. And so if all we ever practiced were the red skills, if all we ever gave our students were the weakest skills, first of all, I would have had a classroom of kids that would have given up immediately. But remember, this tool was built for retention, and retention is about time. And so these skills here are being placed on the list of $sign problems because essentially we call them too old. It's been too long since this particular student has attempted this problem. So Get More Math looks at that data and it says, okay, we know you're really, really good at finding the rate of change, but do you know it's been 2 weeks since you've practiced this problem? So we're going to give it to you. We're going to see if in fact you get it right. If you do, fantastic, we'll take the $sign off. If you get it wrong, we're going to keep that $sign on there, and we're going to ask you to practice it a few more times until we start to see that you are in fact getting it right. So that's that first the first 2 pieces of Get More Math. That initial mastery, that was the very beginning piece where we got to 6 points, which then leads us into the mixed review, where we then look at all the skills we've taught so far this year, and that's where it becomes individualized for each student based on their needs. So I'm going to pause here for a second and see if anybody has any questions. I don't see any hands up, and I don't see any questions. Okay, if anybody has any, you can go ahead and raise your hand. Otherwise, I'm going to go into the assessment piece. Go ahead and do that. All right, so here's the second piece. Get More Math made it very, very simple, and it made a whole lot of sense for me to say to my students, if we are going to do this cumulative mixed review on an almost daily basis, it also makes sense to me that all of your tests are in fact cumulative. Because if you're going to practice a mixture of everything all year long, then I think I'm going to assess you on everything all year long. And I'll tell you why that made such a difference for me. I expected my students to be able to take these very small chapter tests all year long. And then in May, I gave them a massive state level test that covered everything. And then I wondered why they did poorly. Well, that doesn't make much sense. I wasn't preparing them for that all year. So just by changing my tests and making them cumulative, that alone I thought made a huge difference. Now, let's talk about Fridays. I gave my students an assessment every Friday. Now, every other Friday was a little different. We'll talk about it. On the first Friday, let's assume that I gave a major test. So here's an example of a student that took a 37 question test. They got 32 of the 37 questions correct, so they missed 5. And what Get More Math does with the click of a button, there's one button that says create a follow-up. And what it did is it took that particular student's results and it made a quiz just for them based on the 5 skills they missed. And it did that for every single one of my kiddos. So on test day, everybody was taking the same 37 question test. But the awesome part was the very next week, I had all of those kids taking a quiz that was completely different and completely individualized based on the results of their test. Now let's talk about why that was important. I don't know how many of you ever experienced the phenomenon of cram and flush. So your students will study the night before a test. They will cram as much information into their brain just so they can pass the test, just enough to get by. And then when they take that test and they pass it, hopefully, it's almost like all of that information just releases out of their brain so that they can fill it up with the new material. And that's what a lot of my students used to do until I started using this process. Because now my students were like, wait a second, I missed these 5 skills and she's going to give me a quiz 1 week later on those same skills. So I can no longer just cram and flush. I now have to deal with those 5 weaknesses. Now it gets even better. Get More Math actually deals with the 5 weaknesses for me. So think about it. I give a test on Friday. We all know what happens the next Monday. When you come into school on Monday, we all have to keep moving on. We have a certain set of standards we've got to get through. And so I would do that. I would teach new material on Monday, and my students would get through that assignment. And as soon as they got through the assignment, they would all get to mixed review on their own time. But here's what the mixed review looked like. So this is the mixed review the day after a test. And if you notice, we're in mixed review. We've got all our review skills, but suddenly there's a dotted line here. And you'll see 5 colored squares up top, all of which are outlined in red. Here's a hint, they're all outlined in red because they were all answered incorrectly. Have you figured it out? Those are the 5 test questions that this particular student missed. So here's what Get More Math does. It says, okay, student, you need to do 2 things for me. First thing you need to do is fix the test question. So the students actually get to look at all 5, the exact questions, and their answers will be in there. And so if they answered 10 and the answer was really supposed to be 20, they will see the 10. They will actually have to take it out and fix the problem. That's the first thing Get More Math does. But that's not enough. After they fix the problem, Get More Math will give them a problem just like it. So the same type, but a new one. And it will say, okay, you fixed the error. Now do another one on your own and get it right. What do we call that in Get More Math? We call that getting a point. Get it right on the first try. So for each one of these test questions, the students are required to do 2 things. First, fix the mistake. Second, get a point on the same problem type. And once they do that, what Get More Math does, once they do that for all 5, then the student's screen will look like this. Now let's take a look and see what changed. We still have the dotted line. We still have the same 5 skills, but instead of forcing them to only work above the dotted line, now Get More Math says you may work here, but we've also placed some dollar signs down here, and you now have the choice. And my screen would stay like this all week. So on Tuesday, I would teach new material, they would do the assignment, and when they got to review, it looked like this. And on Wednesday, I would teach new material and they would get through the assignment. And when they got to review, it looked like this. And so what would happen is, what would I tell my students on Thursday night? Hey folks, you know tomorrow is follow-up Friday. You've all got your follow-up quizzes coming, but they all knew exactly what was going to be on their quiz. And so there was no longer cram and flush. Instead, it was let's prepare for a test. And whatever mistakes I made, whatever errors I showed, I now have to practice them throughout the week. They will sit above this dotted line so that I'm aware of my weaknesses. And hopefully what happens is a week later, I see data like this. So you'll notice here on the test, this particular student missed 5 questions. That's an 86%. But a week later, she got 4.5 points. Out of her 5, she got a 90% on that quiz. Now, this was data that to me spoke volumes. This was growth from one week to the next. Take a look at this kiddo. This is real data. Here's a kid that got a 64% on the test. So prior to Get More Math, I would have handed him the test. He would have sighed, oh, good, at least I passed. Put it in a folder and we would have done nothing else with it. But look when you use Get More Math. Look what happened a week later. He got 13 of those 15 skills correct because we brought it to his attention, we prioritized it during the review, and he knew he was going to be reassessed. So this assessment piece for me was almost as critical as the mixed review piece. So I will go ahead and pause there again. Let me pull this out, see if I have any further questions. Still no questions? Okay. Let's take a look at some of the data. All right, so this is actually data from Josh Britton's class while he was still in the classroom. Each one of these bars is a particular student. And in Pennsylvania, the state will actually give you a projected score for each student. So it tracks the testing and the data of its students throughout their entire career, so from 4th grade on. And these were high school kiddos taking Algebra I. And so these kids here were all expected to score advanced. These light blue students were expected to pass, but just be proficient. And then these would be basic kiddos and below basic, but regardless, they were all expected to, in fact, fail the test. This line right here is our passing line. So we're going to start out here with these advanced kiddos. You know, these are the kids that you can kind of throw the material to them in any way, shape, or form, and it's probably going to stick. They're most likely going to pass the test, but I will tell you that these kids are often the most challenging kiddos to show growth. And take a look at that. This is where these kids actually scored. So to take a kid that was going to be this advanced and actually make him this advanced is impressive. Now let's take a look at these kiddos. Also significant growth. And now we come down here. These were the kiddos I was teaching. Really, really challenging. It's in my opinion, the most difficult kids to get over that passing mark. And this is what Josh found in his classroom when he was using Get More Math. So even the kids that maybe didn't hit the passing mark, but they still showed phenomenal growth over the years. This is a tool. What I love most about this chart is it shows that Get More Math is a tool that really helps every kid across the spectrum, no matter where they fall. They were all outperforming their expectation. Tyrone Area Middle School. So now we're looking at also another algebra test. This is still in Pennsylvania, but these were 7th and 8th grade kiddos. So this is a different grouping than the last group I just showed you. I just want you to notice that before using Get More Math for both 2015 and 16, in Pennsylvania, they actually showed negative growth for 2 years. So after we used this in the high school, we went down and we shared it with the middle school. And the year that they used Get More Math in 2017, their growth jumped to a positive 12.3. So this was a really significant jump from the 2 years prior. State College Area High School, this is a case where they take about 100 students. These are also algebra kiddos in their high school. It's their lowest grouping, so their lowest ability level kiddos. And 4 years prior to Get More Math, they were averaging about 3 kids a year passing out of 100. They were not pleased with these results. When they heard about Get More Math, they decided to jump in, and they used it almost on a daily basis. And in 2017, they had 33 kids out of 100 pass, which is a significant difference over the 3 per year for the 4 years prior. They actually had 3 of those 33 kids get advanced, and they had never had an advanced student in the 4 years before that. In 2018, they continued using Get More Math. They had 39 kids pass the test, and of the 39, 11 students were advanced. So they're just continuing to get even better. We call this the tale of 2 teachers. Teacher number 1, this was a 6th grade teacher. His PVAS growth scores ranked him at about the 51st percentile. So he was doing better than half the teachers in Pennsylvania, but half the teachers were doing better than him. So he discovered the program from Josh and started to use it in his classroom. And the following year, his students took the 6th grade PSSA, and his growth scores that year ranked him at the 85th percentile. He was very pleased with this jump. Teacher number 2 across the hall had not been using Get More Math, and she saw that year that her ranking was at the 38th percentile. So you can guess what happened then. She talked to teacher number 1 and said, "What exactly are you using? Can you get me one of those accounts?" Which he did. They both started using Get More Math in their classroom the following year. And when they gave their kiddos the 6th grade PSSA that next year, and they took a look at their growth scores, they were then ranked in the 98th and the 95th percentile. Very impressive. The only thing more impressive than that is when a class of 7th graders send you a massive poster thanking you for all the math problems that you've sent them throughout the years. This is actually hanging in Josh Britton's living room. You can see the students drew out the screen. They've got a math problem here. They understand the dollar signs. They understand our 4 corners. And they say here, "Thank you, GMM Josh." And this part in parentheses is maybe our favorite. It says, "Hey, we actually know how to do math." And I can attest to the fact that this program builds a confidence in students that for the longest time have had very little confidence in mathematics. And we love that piece as well. So let's review why, in my opinion, Get More Math makes such a significant impact when used correctly in a math classroom. It really empowers the teacher. It was built by a teacher, so it does just about everything a math teacher would want it to do besides teach the material. It really optimizes the practice. We take a classroom of 30 kids. We all know they have different abilities. And instead, we give them a one-size-fits-all assignment out of a textbook or a worksheet. Well, Get More Math doesn't do that anymore. Get More Math says, "Hey, practice this new material. And once you've shown me that you know enough of that today, I'm going to go back and make sure that you know everything from the past. And I'm going to do it in the most efficient way possible because I'm going to give you exactly what you need most." Lots of real-time data. So while my students are working, I have a teacher dashboard. I can see how many points they're earning. I can see what questions they're working on. There's a timer that was so important for me. It actually keeps a clock of how long it's been since a student has answered a question correctly. Why did I love that? Students who in the past would sit and quietly work for 40 minutes and never ask a question, Now, when that timer turns to 6 minutes, it turns bright red, catches my attention, and I can now go over and address that student and say, hey, what's going on? I see you're working hard, but it's been 6 minutes since you've got a question correct. So there must be an issue. Let's see if we can address it. Lots of school choice of problem types. We are continuing to add new problems to our problem bank on an almost weekly basis. So we do not simply build these curriculums and say, you must teach this if you are teaching 6th grade. Instead, we give you a massive bank and we say, listen, let's take your curriculum, let's take what you want to teach, and now you can take our materials and build them into assignments so that they fit what you want. I've already addressed the cumulative assessment with the follow-up piece and how critical I think that was. Much more time and energy for teaching. I will tell you, I was no longer grading papers, collecting worksheets, going over homework because it was all done throughout the program. But I did put my sneakers on, or at least I wanted to, had my Fitbit on my wrist because I got my steps in. I had more questions than ever before because suddenly students knew when they were wrong, students needed to fix problems, and so they wanted my help. So I spent more time in the classroom actually teaching and instructing than I did grading, which I really enjoyed. Certainly increases student engagement and motivation. We all know that our students want to be using technology. There are these fabulous little brain breaks that are built into the program so students can earn game credits to play a game that's built right into the app. They're only 90 seconds, so you don't have to worry about your students wasting an entire period. As soon as the 90-second time frame is up, the game disappears and they can start it again once they've done more math problems, earned more points, and got more game credits. So it was a great way to motivate my kiddos. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of my presentation. I just wanted to follow up with some frequently asked questions here. How do you sign up if you're interested? The great news is Get More Math gives a free trial for the remainder of this school year. So it's not 30 days. There's no limit on teacher accounts or student accounts when you're in the free trial. And it will last up through August of next year. So if you simply go to our website, getmoremath.com, you will see the green button that says free trial. Go ahead and click on that, fill out the information, and we'd be happy to provide you with a free account for the remainder of this year. What happens after you do that? Well, here's our training team. One of our trainers will reach out to you or your staff, and we will offer first a demonstration because we realize that just like buy-in is important with students, buy-in is also important with teachers. They have to understand how Get More Math works, why it's so effective, before we actually give you your account and offer to train you so that you can figure out how things work. So all of this online training is at no cost. If for some reason you are interested in training your entire staff, please feel free to reach out to me directly, and we can talk about what those requirements are and how that works, and if we can maybe set something like that up. What are the technology requirements? Well, let's talk about the teacher first. In order for the teacher app to run, your teachers will need an actual computer. So some sort of laptop, because the program right now requires Java. So for the teacher, I just want to stress that the teacher needs to have an actual computer in order to install Java and run the app. However, all of your students, they can access the student end of things from any device that simply has a browser. So Chromebooks are fabulous, iPads are great, computers are great, cell phones even work. So it's very, very accessible for the student. We just want to stress that with the teachers, they will need an actual computer to run their side of things. The other piece is this. We don't say that you have to be a one-to-one school in order for this to be effective, but it certainly helps. I like to make it clear that Get More Math is not, it's not going to work the way you want it to if it becomes a Friday fun day activity. You know, I know a lot of teachers like to use technology maybe once a week or once every other week. That's not how Get More Math was designed. It was truly designed to become the practice tool. And so it's one of those pieces that the more you use it, the more effective it will be. And so nothing is more frustrating than when I go to a school and I show this amazing program to teachers and then they tell me that they have no devices. So we just want to be realistic about those requirements. And then the very last piece is who can you contact? So I've just listed two simple email addresses here. We've got sales@getmoremath.com. You can also use info@getmoremath.com. And that will take you to all of our account managers across the country and support@getmoremath.com. So that will take you to all of our trainers, myself included. So actually, I don't think I actually should have changed that sales. Go ahead and scratch that, folks. If you're watching, do not use sales. Change that to info. That's my mistake. I can probably actually change that now. Let's change that to info@getmoremath.com. There you go. So those would be our, there we have it. Okay, so you've been such a quiet group. Let me see, I'm still not seeing any questions. Not seeing any hands. Does anyone have anything in particular that they need to ask? Otherwise, I think that's it, folks. Please reach out if you're interested in any more information.